welcome back. Nice to see everybody. I usually have a lot of people that I want to say thank you to, but I know the Fletcher co-directors have carefully curated a list of people to recognize and thank, and I'm going to stay in my lane and just say we're very grateful to you all. Thank you so much for everybody who supports us, shows up for us, and helps us out in all kinds of ways. I recently read some writing by Hanif Abdurraqib, an American poet, writer, and cultural critic from Columbus, Ohio. He was writing about an anthology of Palestinian resistance poems that was translated into English and released in 1970 called Enemy of the Sun. He says, "It struck me that the poems within were written mostly in the 60s. It realigned me towards the depth of history. If there were resistance poems, then there was resistance." And the line that struck me in thinking about the Fletcher exhibit is this: art so often leaves a footprint that distorted histories cannot easily erase. It is a reminder that there was a history before and there will be a history beyond. And most importantly, it's a reminder of our shared humanity. As our juror Adam DelMarcelle writes in his statement, it is the responsibility of the artist to face, report, and repeat what it means to be alive in their time and to have the courage to sacrifice themselves in order to get that story out. Because this offering is not always wanted. In fact, it's often unwelcome in the time of the maker because it very clearly holds up a mirror to the viewer, forcing them to confront themselves. The Fletcher exhibit is a space where we can get to know something, not only with our minds, but also emotionally and physically. It's an experience that allows us to process, to grieve, and to feel the events happening in our world. And there's simply no denying that it's a dark time in our world right now. There are many reasons to feel hopeless and afraid. We're experiencing crises in every aspect of our democracy, about feminism, human rights, immigration, poverty, housing, our healthcare system, about combating systemic racism, about the environment, about our very belief in what is good and right. But to quote Adam again, the interrogation of self and the world around us is ignited by the decorated walls of museums that can and will start the revolution. This exhibition is a celebration of the silent work that art does, when it makes us brave and when it makes us believe in our collective capacity to create change. I first met Adam when he co-curated the Epidemic exhibition with then Bachelor chair Eric Avery back in 2019. I experienced the installation he made documenting his brother's overdose, and I spent time with his work Macy pictured in the catalog. I've been thinking a lot about this red thread of grief and loss that many of us are feeling in our personal lives and that all of us are experiencing collectively as we live through once-in-a-lifetime event after once-in-a-lifetime event. Channeling these experiences into emotionally resonant works of art is accomplishing what Adam calls connection through the shared experience of pain with everyone alive. This awareness and manifestation creates an opportunity to constructively use our pain to initiate measurable shifts in power. As Adam writes, the social artist, the social realist does not have hope, they are a hope. Adam DelMarcelle has had a lot of practice in activating communities through this kind of artistic expression. By acknowledging that the political landscape is also a cultural landscape, he opens up new terrain to work in and is bridging divides between institutional spaces like the Reece Museum and artists who bring direct action to the forefront of their work. Adam's work as an artist and educator has been nationally and internationally recognized as he continues to challenge systems of power and provides crucial information to the public. Please join me in welcoming our 2023 Fletcher juror, Adam DelMarcelle.
First, I want to say thanks for the introduction. It was getting me a little choked up. It was really well done. I want to say that I'm really honored to be here. When the Dyers asked me if I would do this, I was taken back that they would think that I was of the level to do this. I was honored to meet them when I was here with Dr. Eric Avery. I'm sure some of you guys got a chance to meet him when he was here. He's one of my art and design heroes that I'm now able to collaborate with through the shared work that we do. So to be in this position, I'm just really greatly honored to be here. And to be back at the Reece Museum, Fletcher, Becca, and the whole team here do amazing work. And it's, like I said, it's an honor to be able to come and select work for this exhibition, which, by the way, is not easy to do. There were 280 pieces of art that were given to me to look at and to read about and to consider. And if it was up to me, all of them would be in there. It doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what any of the work looks like. Doesn't the aesthetics are the least important thing when it comes to the work that's in that gallery. It's about why it was made, and then the compulsion that the artists had to want to make this thing, to get the story out. So to have the chance to jury something like this, it's strange to jury an exhibition about socially activated art because it's all important. It's all important because it's made. It was made for the right reasons. So anyways, it's a great honor to be here. So I thought what I would do, and I'm going to do my best. I've been spending the last 2 days meeting with students and preaching at them and standing on soapbox and yelling at them, talking to them about the importance they have towards humanity through the work they make. So I'm going to do my best to, I feel like maybe I did too well this afternoon. It might not be as good tonight. I was felt really good about what I said to the students this afternoon. And I hate when I do that because then it puts pressure on me for later in the night where I'm like, I'm going to mess this up. It's not happening. So again, I'm honored to be here. So I thought what I would do is spend a little bit of time talking about my work so you can get better context as to why the Dyers asked me to be here. And my work has special significance to this place in the world. My work is all about the continuing war on drugs in the United States. It is about the exploding overdose crisis. And that's the first thing I'm going to say too. I'm going to preach to you guys a lot tonight about my subject matter because that is what social artists do. Be very suspect of a social artist that stands in front of you and talks about how great their work is because they're not making it for the right reasons. The only reason I make it is so that I have a chance to hold you all hostage for a little while and talk to you about what matters to me. And if you talk to any one of the artists back there in that exhibit, they would do the exact same thing. That's why they make what they make. So I'm going to talk to you a lot about overdose in America, which is a very sensitive subject to this place in the world, because this is one of the hardest hit places in the world, Appalachia. Even by design, by certain people in this country that used this place as a test tube to try something out, and it created an exploding overdose epidemic in our country. And I call it an overdose epidemic. There is no opioid epidemic. There's an overdose epidemic in this country. We call it an opioid epidemic. What that does is it creates a stigma around opioid use. I have no problem with people using opioids. They're amazing things. They're made for dealing with pain. We need these things. What I have a problem with is people dying from using them. And so I'm going to talk a lot about that. So if you have to step out at any point while I'm talking about my work, feel free to do that. Because I'm going to talk about my family, my experience. So I do this work because in 2014, I found my brother Joey dead in my home from an overdose. And that moment changed my life forever. It changed the way I looked at the world around me. It changed what I think I should be doing with my life. It changed my family forever. And it put me on a path of trying to make sense out of this thing that I can't make sense of. My work is made so I can be in constant dialogue with him. I can't talk to him anymore. So this is how I can be in dialogue with him. So a little bit about my brother, Joey. It's important you know about him. The least important thing about him is that he died from an overdose. That doesn't matter. He was a social worker in my town. He was the best friend I ever had. He was. He had 30-inch biceps. I mean, he was the epitome of fitness. He was my little brother, but I couldn't kick the shit out of me at any moment. But he was my best friend. And he cared about people. He was a social worker. And that's what my background is also. So when I started to bring art back into my practice, I tie it to social work, and that's so I look at myself as a social realist artist, but also a social worker in a big way. So when he died, I started to have to process his death. So what I did is I did what I could do, which was read everything I possibly could about what was happening in our country, read as many articles as I could. I was learning about what happens when you die, what you go through physically when you die. And I was trying to better understand what was happening in our country, which in 2014, this thing was ramping up. We were losing people on a regular basis. And now in 2023, we're losing people every 5 minutes. So while you guys listen to me talk tonight, by the end of this talk and the end of our awards tonight, we're gonna have lost about 40 people by the end of this event tonight. And that's ever present in my mind when I talk about this, to make sure that you get something from this you can take back into the world with you. That's what all of those artists are doing back there in that exhibit also. They're making things with the hope that you're gonna ask a singular question to take back into the world with you, and then the ripples go and they go. So I'm gonna breeze through some of this work so you can see what I've done. So I'm a printmaker, although I do lots of different things. You're gonna see that in my work. The reason why I do lots of different things is because that is the way that we can be most helpful. So I talk about the same 6 or 7 things. I just come at it from 100 different ways. And that's the teacher in me trying to find the best ways to connect you with the subject matter and to consider how you might be able to take it back in the world with you. So I started by making drawings late into the night about my brother's death, about how my brother was handled by the police, or how our family was handled by the police after he was dead. To give you insight, within an hour of me finding my brother in my home dead of an overdose, I had a detective tell me, as I'm getting angry, saying things like, we have to find out what happened. Like, where did these drugs come from? Someone else might be affected. He said to me that I need to lower my expectations. I've seen hundreds of these, and there's nothing remarkable about your brother or his death. Mm. That's an hour after this happened. So imagine what they were thinking about 2 hours. He wasn't even a thought to them anymore. Also, by the way, that's the kind of thing you don't say to an artist, because I'm like, that's going to come back in something that I make, and you're going to have to face that. So that's what I did in this original work, was making things that I heard officers say. This was from I did interviews with some officers, and this is one of them said, you guys don't know what Narcan is? It's a miracle drug. It's what reverses an overdose. And one of them said to me, fuck Narcan, let them die. Like, I have no time for saving lives. So needless to say, that shows up in my work. Local authorities in my town don't like that this stuff shows up in my work. The chief of police in my city, when this work went out, I was at a museum with my family, and I got a call on the phone. It was the chief of police in my town saying that they don't appreciate that I put their words on posters and put them out into the world. And don't tell them to say these fucking things, right? Tell them to be better. So I'm documenting as much as I can. And then on the second anniversary of my brother's death, what I did, I'm a printmaker. If anybody in here has made prints, especially screen prints, it's a physical act. It is an act of making, right? So I would go into my studio and I would print and print and print and print and print until my arm didn't work anymore. And then I would make something else and I'd make it again. And I was doing that to be able to deal with my grief. And my home was starting to fill up with all of this work that I'm making about my brother and about the authorities in my town, and how we were handled and things that I felt were unjust. And my home was filling up with it. On the second anniversary of his death, I put 1,000 of them on the street. So we went out with my brother, another friend, my other brother, and we taped them to every light pole in our town. And it wasn't to create some sort of social message. It was a way to honor him. It was a way for me to purge this work. Because if you're a social artist, the one thing I will say about this work is that when you get into the process of making it, that's the easy part, because we're artists. So the process is what is therapeutic to us. But then once the thing lives in the world, now you got to deal with it in the world. And I had thousands of these things that I now had to deal with. So I purged them and I hung them up. And what happened 2 days after that is the mayor in my city ordered the police to go out and destroy all of the work on the street. And why did they do that? They did it because they said I was breaking the law. I was hanging things on light centers, and that's illegal. The problem is they tore down every poster of mine and left up every yard sale sign, every local wrestling match, every band. So it had nothing to do with the law and everything to do with putting a message onto the street that they didn't want anybody to think about or be talking about. Because what happens when we talk, then we find someone else that has a common story. And then that goes to common stories start to build. Now we start to organize. And if we organize, that's dangerous to a status quo. Because now we're in a position to change things. And they don't want to change things in my town. They don't want to spend money towards this issue. So this was a threat to them. So they destroyed my work. So the work then, I had a local business owner reach out to me after they destroyed my work and was like, I support what you're doing. How would you like to cover the entire front of my building in your posters? And I'm like, yes, I'm gonna do that. So I got this giant ladder and I was putting these posters up in the evening in my town. And Lebanon's a small town, smaller than Johnson City, way smaller than Johnson City. And this where I was at was kind of near the only bougie restaurant in our town. I mean, there was really no bougie restaurants in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, but this was as close as it gets. And somebody saw me coming out of there doing this, and they called the police. And at this point, the police are now trying to figure out a way to stop me from doing this. So I wish I had pictures of it. So I'm on this ladder, and these like 5 police cars like converge on my location, and they all come out, and they have their bravado going, and they're coming up, and they're like, "We fucking got it!" Like they got me. And just as that happened, the business owner came out of that door down there and was like, no. I gave him permission to be here. And I got to watch 5 Lebanon police officers deflatedly walk into the night. It was the most tasty moment of our career to see that happen. It was amazing. So this guy actually got tore down a couple of days after it went up. My suspicion is the mayor had somebody come in the middle of the night and rip it down, but it's fine. Every time they destroy my work, it becomes more important than it was before. Right? So, and because they tear it down, the news picks it up. They tear it down, it gets written about. They tear it down. So, and that wasn't my original intention. But once I realized that I could play this game with them, then I became dangerous. So what I had to figure out a way for people to actually see these things. Because what happened was people saw a couple of them and they got tore down. And they're like, we saw this one, but I didn't see this one. Is that actually true? Is that really happening in our city? So I had to figure out a way to keep the work up if the police couldn't tear it down. Because I wanted the message to get out there, even though it was getting written about. It needed to get out. So what I did is I started a GoFundMe campaign, and I got a decommissioned theater projector. And it's on a high-tech setup, by the way. It's a $20,000 projector sitting on top of a coffee table with a generator. So if the police didn't like a 13 by 19 inch poster, now they get a 30-foot by 80-foot projection on the side of the building. And it's just light. It is the epitome, in my opinion, it's the epitome of nonviolent direct action. It is putting something on a building that is in nothing more than light. In areas that artists would never be invited to put work. This is on the local funeral home in my city. This is where the majority of overdose victims end up. This is where my brother ended up. And I branded the front of this building in a respectful way. There was no services happening in the building. I made sure that I wouldn't do that. My intention is not to destroy things in my city. It's just to get people to ask questions about what's happening. So this was a stop motion. This image doesn't really do it justice. It was a stop motion of a person injecting heroin, nodding off, overdosing, and dying. And I had actors from a local university and a makeup artist that does stuff for like Broadway shows that did makeup, and it changes, and typographically things change on the screen. If you're in a place like New York or Chicago, something like this might be background noise, but if you're in a small town like Lebanon, Pennsylvania, this is like, what is this thing? And it did what I wanted it to do. People started stopping their cars, they would get out, and they would start to talk to me. And as a graphic designer, is there any graphic designers in here? So as a graphic designer, you rarely get to be with your work. Like, when's the last time you were on the highway, you saw a graphic designer like pointing at a billboard? Like, I made that billboard. You never see it. You never see these people. So I had to also confront my audience in a different way. But it did what I wanted to do. They would stop, and they would get out, and they would say, I just lost someone to overdose also. I just got out of jail. I had this experience. And these round tables started on the street in my town, and they started to make, conversation started to happen. So I did, I've done projections now kind of all over the place. I even did one on the headquarters of Purdue Pharma in Stamford, Connecticut. You guys, yeah, so they're the makers of OxyContin. So if you don't know who they are, that's who they are. I think I'm one of the other things I started to do was I started to get invited to do exhibitions. And this work is not meant for exhibitions. So I gave them stipulations. So if museums want to have this work that I'm making, it has to be heavy community outreach. If you guys saw when Dr. Eric Avery was here, an epidemic was in this space, he was in here constantly, teaching classes, giving naloxone trainings, having this person come in. Local NA and AA groups were using this as a space for themselves. It was an activated community outreach space. And in this case, this first place that, it's how I had met Eric Avery, and when I had this opportunity to do work in this museum, they asked me, if you, any artist in the world you could show with, who would you want to be? And I was like, well, it has to be Eric Avery. I learned about him in my undergraduate. His work had stuck with me like all that time. So I invited him, and we do this show called Epidemic, which is his AIDS work from the 80s and 90s, or HIV and AIDS work, and this overdose work. And they're very connected subject matter because and they're epidemics that are feeding each other, right? So in Philadelphia, where I'm doing my recent work, HIV cases are up 400% this year because of intravenous drug use on the street. So one epidemic is now feeding the other. But for them to have this work in this museum, they had to agree to put a harm reduction space in this museum. Anybody know what harm reduction is in here? So harm reduction is, well, harm reduction is a lot of things. Your seatbelt is harm reduction. That's harm reduction. But when it comes to drug users, what harm reduction is people that provide sterile supplies, needle exchange, which, by the way, takes needles off the street. It doesn't put them on the street. So on the other side of the politics of this says that needle exchange puts dirty needles on the street, it's horseshit. Because in places like Philadelphia, the only way to get clean needles is to give you other needles out. So it doesn't do that, right? So there's a harm reduction space in here, and I got the local harm reduction workers from this area to man this space. So they were in this little harm reduction wing that I built for them. This cabinet had all of the supplies they give people in Africa, safer, and they were in the gallery. People came in to see an art show. They had to be confronted with these people they would normally see on the street that would never talk to them because they had feelings about harm reduction. But when they got to meet them directly at a human level, it changed the conversation, lessened the distance, and it allowed them to consider drug use in a different way. And part of this exhibition too, I made this piece. This was actually a completely black room. This is a reproduction of my brother's room. And it was in a gallery space that we then framed in. And when I found my brother, he was in my home. And I took the door off the hinges of my home, and you had to go through that door into the bedroom. And there was a sign there. It was kind of a dirty trick someday. There was a sign there just before you went in, you could make your mind up whether you wanted to go in or you didn't go in. But the idea is every time someone would turn that knob and go in, they helped me carry a little bit of my burden of grief. And it was, yeah, it was something. Oh, here's the projection on Purdue Pharma. So this was a great story too. So we did this, and down here, there's a door down here, and at a certain point, like, all of these suits started to pour out of the building, and they have their phones, and they're recording it, and they're yelling at each other, and they can't figure out where we are. The only thing I felt bad about is they yelled at the security guard who was in the booth. He couldn't do anything about it. It wasn't his fault. But this is what we did. I think I have a short video. So the police showed up. They're over here. They just couldn't find us. Okay, so we did this thing, and often when I travel, students ask me, students ask me, how do you do this work? Like, these issues are too big. There's too much to them. They're too layered. Like, I don't know where I fit in this thing. What you need to do for the students that are here, the artists that are here that make this work, is you just need to do a thing. Anything. And that ripple has the chance of meeting other people along the way. You throw the stone in the water and you let it travel away from you, and it will and it can impact change. So you just do anything. That was just two assholes from Pennsylvania showing up in Stamford, Connecticut and using a projector to project on a building. It's not rocket science, it's not sophisticated, it's just, we just did it. And as a result of that, the next day, Purdue Pharma, a $14 billion a year company, had to make a statement about two assholes in a projector from Pennsylvania. They had to consider us. And that's what all of that work is doing. We have to consider all of that because of the artists that made that. And that's the power of why you do what we do. I'll share one more project with you, and then I want to talk about some of the work back in the Fletcher Exhibit. So I met this woman named Rhonda Lottie at a protest at Purdue Pharma. So after I did the projection, she reached out to me through social media and invited me to come to a protest at Purdue Pharma. And at that point, I wasn't really doing that. I wasn't connecting with other families. I wasn't ready to do that. But she kept encouraging me to come. So my older brother and I went, and I'm so glad I did. I connected with 500 other families from around the country that had lost people to overdose. And I started to feel a sense of community again through the shared grief of this new formed family from all this tragedy. And Rhonda lost her daughter Mariah to an overdose. And Rhonda, what she has done now is she has turned that grief into extreme badass activism. She is on the front line. She is bringing families together. She's doing grief groups. She's protesting. And I met her and we immediately connected. I mean, within minutes, we're hugging each other and crying together. And when I started to think about what the next project was going to be, I started to think about Mariah. And this is Mariah right here. Mariah died when she was 19. Again, her overdose is the least important part of her life. Mariah was massively intelligent. She read all the time. She knew more words in the dictionary than any human on the planet. She was beautiful. She had aspirations to get out of Watertown, Massachusetts, which is where they live. She was an amazing person who had a bad moment that took them out of this world. But I decided that I wanted to do something to talk about this issue, and I wanted to include Mariah in some way. So this place came into my view. How many people here follow the work of Nan Golden? Do you guys know the photographer Nan Golden? So you'll know that she has an activist group called PAIN, and they are protesting museums that bear the Sackler name. So the Sacklers, if you don't know this, the Sackler family are huge supporters of the arts. They donate millions and millions and millions of dollars to the arts. First off, why do they do that? They do that to create this giant velvet curtain in front of the real shit that they do, which is, since the 60s, have made medication that have subjugated entire generations of people. Started with Valium and all those mommy's little helper ads that you guys have seen, there used to be out. That's that family. They were marketing geniuses, and they marketed highly addictive medication to a public that felt comfortable using those medications because Arthur Sackler was a doctor, and he made us feel comfortable, right? So the PAIN group is protesting these places because the Sackler name is carved into all of these walls of museums, and they want the name taken down. Now, I will say this, I disagree with that. I can't more strongly disagree with that, and I'll tell you why. In America, we are very good at erasing our history. We erase it constantly. It's constantly being rewritten and re-erased and rewritten and re-erased, and the narrative gets more and more skewed. And by the time we get to where we're at right now, the narrative is we never did anything wrong in our history for a lot of people, and we know that's bullshit, right? So if we take the Sackler name off the wall without acknowledging it in some other way, physically in the space, we erase history. So the Sacklers art wash with culture, and they make us forget about all the terrible things they do by looking at the beautiful art that they've donated to museums. They culture wash. What Nan Golden's group is trying to do is whitewash. So what we did is we created a smartphone application called Mariah. Has anybody in here played Pokemon Go? Yeah, so Pokemon Go is basically, it uses this thing called augmented reality, which means I have an application on my phone and I can walk around in a space, and through either GPS or something that triggers it, things will actually appear in the physical space in your phone, in the picture plane of your phone. That's basically what it does. So you can augment on top of physical space. So we decided, my wife Missy, who's sitting here with my son Joey here in the second row, right before COVID locked everything down, the two of us walked through the Met with a notepad. We're taking notes, and I was photographing everything. And they didn't know that we were secretly like spying on the Met and figuring out a way to hack this space. But that's what we did. And then COVID shut everything down. And I had a partner that I partner with in Chicago named Heather. She's a tech. She's very interested in disrupting tech. That's what she's into. So with her in Chicago, me in Pennsylvania, and a developer friend of ours in Barcelona, we made this thing that then happened in New York City. So we're all over the place making this work. Now it's showing up in New York City. And what it does is as you go through and you come across artifacts that were purchased with opioid money, a three-dimensional typography comes out. It's hard to tell what it does in these flat photos. The typography pops out of it, and it teaches you something specifically about where the money came from to purchase that artifact, while simultaneously having an audio narration done by Mariah's mother, Rhonda. And you learn about Mariah as you go through the museum, while you're learning about the money and the family that killed her. And it's done in a way that's, if you go to the Met, you guys can use this. We also got this app past the gatekeepers at Apple, which was a huge win. I thought for sure they were going to shut it down because it's activist based. It's fucking with one of their donors. Like all their donors, support the Met. So we got it into the App Store, so you can actually download it now if you want it. And you learn about Mariah, not just the hard times. You learn about who she was as a person, right? Which is how we get people to consider the fact that this time 300,000 people died from overdose. That number doesn't mean anything to most people because it's too big. It's too big for us to actually, it just kind of washes over us. The number washes over us. So how do you get someone to think about something big? You talk about one story, one person, and that's Mariah. A lot of that work out there talks about one person. So if you go into the Met, all of these areas that have little dot teach you about Mariah's life and about the Sackler family. But some of the stories are amazing. So one of my favorite story is, I think, right about here. And Mariah's mom, Rhonda, tells the story that she was called into school when Mariah was in second grade. And she was like, she couldn't believe she was getting called in because Mariah was this amazing kid. She did everything right. She was involved with everything. So she goes in, and the principal tells her the problem is that when Mariah walks from class to class, Mariah was a gymnast. She walks on her hands. And that's the big problem. And those are the things we learn about the humanness of these people. And that is what we need to remember. So you will hear about the hard times as you get back here. And then when you make your way all the way back and you go into here, this is the Temple of Dendor. And this is the most important part. So the Temple of Dendor, if you've been to the Met, holds an Egyptian temple that's built in there. That temple was he paid for by Caesar Augustus. Caesar Augustus subjugated the people of Egypt. And when he did that, to make them feel better about being subjugated, he had this temple built by local craftspeople in the style of, although his effigy is actually carved into one of the walls, he couldn't help but put himself in there. And it is a symbol of the subjugation of a people inside of the Sackler, which is another temple to the subjugation of people just 1,000 years into the future. It's one symbol of terrible capitalism and greed inside another one. So when you make your way into here, this is the Sackler Gallery, at least it used to be. The Met did take the name down since we've done this work. And it's renamed the Mariah Lottie Bordeaux Gallery. It's named for her. And that's what I want museums to do. If they can't, if they take the name down, they have to replace it. And they're not doing that right now. They're not having the courage to do it. So what do they get if they don't take the name down and they don't change or don't add it? What they get, so what they get now is a death clock. This clock starts, it's offset over the pyramid, looks just like this. And every 5 minutes, that number rotates up 1 indefinitely. And that represents people dying in this time. That's the amount of time it takes to go down in the United States. So now there's these death clock all over the world. One's in London, Cape Leather, Serpentine Gallery, Globe Theater, Shakespeare Theater, any place that takes the name down forever. So they change the name. They rename them for a victim, or they put a plaque up that acknowledges the past. I'll take it down. But my hope is not to break that. So in the meantime, they get these death clocks. These are the places that have it so far. There might be a couple more that are added. But their reach is deep. So, another story about the sacrifices. So when I went there to do that projection, I reached out to museums and galleries that did activist art in Stamford, Connecticut, and none of them responded to me. None of them wrote back to me. I was just looking for support. And there was one in particular that was an activist art gallery, they called themselves that, and they didn't respond. So I emailed again, they didn't respond. So I called them on the phone. I'm like, guys, if I'm coming here, this is not your rally. I'm not asking you to do anything. I just want you to support it. And there was a long pause on the phone, and they said, we can't do that. And I'm like, well, why? And they're like, well, the Sackler family prints all of our catalogs from the gallery for free. So their reach is not just big institutions, it's small institutions. Pay them off, get everybody on your side, and then when the news doesn't go your way, you remind them that you give them when they give you money. 30. All right, so the last thing, how am I doing time-wise? Am I okay? All right, okay. So I'll show you guys, real quick, so the project has now extended to other places. So there's a really amazing museum in San Francisco called the Leverform Archive. And it is, if you're a typographic person, this is the place in the world for you to be. And they had an exhibition 2 summers ago called Strike Through, and it was on the history of typographic protest and typography and protest. So they asked us if we'd be a part of the exhibition, which was great, we agreed. And then they asked us if we would make an add-on for the app that would call out areas of historic protest in San Francisco and the Bay Area. So before I do anything with Mariah, I had to talk to Rhonda. Mariah's mom called the shots with this project, and I told her about it. And I was like, I'm not so sure we should do it. Like, it's not really about the subject matter. But she was like, Adam, go fucking do it. You have to do it. Like, Mariah would want you to do it. That's actually what she said. She said, yeah, whatever the word she's making. She's like, go fucking do that thing. So when we walk, so in San Francisco, if you go to the Black Panther's headquarters in Oakland, you'll hear Bobby Seale read the 10 points of the Black Panther program. If you go to Occupy Wall Street, you'll see them occupying Wall Street. If you go to Berkeley, something will pop up in Berkeley, you'll see Country Joe McDonald saying, fixing to dye rag. If you go to Harvey Milk Plaza, you'll see the vigil that happened for Harvey Milk after he was assassinated. If you go to Golden Gate Bridge and you bring your phone up, all of a sudden you'll see 10,000 kids taking over Golden Gate Bridge after George Floyd died. So it is, it's using Mariah now in a way to call out even deeper histories of protest. Also, too, for graphic design folks in here, art folks, Leverform Archive makes amazing books. And this one's on a typographic message of protest. And it's amazing. And I'm lucky enough that Mariah is in there. Which again, I don't give a shit about that as far as the work is concerned. But when someone flips through that, they're going to learn about Mariah, they're going to learn about my brother, they're going to learn about people dying of overdose in the United States. It's going to get them to ask questions. So this piece is my current piece, so that's my brother Charlie right there. So we got clothing donated to us from all over the United States from families that lost people to overdose. So we took that clothing, or I took that clothing, cut it all apart, and made these sheets of paper out of their clothing. And this play is called The Shadow That Broke the Light, and it is the thread that holds it together is stories about my brother. Really amazing, funny. All the stories we love about and then some sad ones, and then it's like bulk of it is stories that families share from all over the country. And this play is designed to last for 24 hours straight. So it starts as this bare room. Every 5 minutes, another sheet gets added to the wall, and by the time the day is done, 267 sheets fill the entire room, and that is the amount of people that died in that day from overdose. So it creates this kind of Japanese tea house to all of these victims. So it is touring right now. I'd love to bring it to ETSU. So bust Becca's chops. I'll bring it in here, and I'll bring it here tomorrow. So it's touring right now. All right, so the Fletcher exhibit. I need to talk a little bit about the Fletcher exhibit because I was moved to be here, to be asked to do this. And when I think about that work in there, and I think about those that have come before us that do this work, there's one person for me that is my North Star, and that is this person right here. So everybody knows that this is James Baldwin. There is supposed to be audio here. I might have to do, sometimes you have to like take it off the full. So I want to play for you just, it's probably going to work. I think to get it to play, you have to actually take it out of the main view. So there, if you guys have not heard this before, every person in here, after tonight, should go home and listen to this 20-minute talk, The Artist's Struggle for Their Integrity. I listen to it 4 times a week. I can't stop listening to it. It's a roadmap for the activist artists, and it's something that I think, it's a constant reminder. So I wanted to play just a minute of it because it is amazing and it's important.
You survive it. And in some terrible way, which I suppose no one can ever describe, you are compelled, you are corralled, you are bullwhipped into dealing with whatever it is that hurt you. And what is crucial here is that if it hurt you, that is not what is important. Everybody's hurt. What is important, what bullwhips you, what corrals you, what drives you, torments you, is that you must find some way of using this to connect you with everyone else alive. This is all you have to do it with. You must understand that your pain is trivial, except insofar as you can use it to connect with other people's pain, and insofar as you can do that with your pain, you can be released from it, and then hopefully it works the other way around too. Insofar as I can tell you what it is like to suffer, perhaps I can help you to suffer less.
It's 20 minutes worth listening to, especially if this is the type of art you're interested in. You should check it out. So when I listen to this, the artist that I think of immediately is one of your past Fletcher exhibit jurors. Oop. This person. So this is the work of Sue. How many people saw Sue when she was here last time? She's amazing. Right? She'll destroy you. She's amazing. But this image represents exactly what James Baldwin was just talking about. This is an image of Sue drawing the slaughterhouse at the side of her home she grew up in England. She would sneak in there as a kid, and she would draw what she saw. And she would put herself in a position of not being able to change what is happening in front of her. She can't change the fact that slaughterhouses exist. She can't stop mechanized slaughterhouses from happening. But what she can do is she can go into these spaces and traumatize herself while she draws for the betterment of all of us. That again is what all the artists back there are doing. They're bearing themselves raw, they're bearing witness directly for all of us with the hope that we don't have to be traumatized in the same way the artist was. That's it. And I believe strongly that is what we're here to do. That's how we're helpful to humanity, is that we can use our ability to be able to document what it means to be alive in our time. And if we do it honestly and we don't lie, what you'll find out is that our trauma is not individual. You think it is. I thought it was when my brother died. So I met 500 other families. It's not individual. And that, if you stay honest to your approach and honest to your subject matter, you stay within your experience, you will make things that connect to others. And those things have the ability to change. And at the very least, they have the ability to get questions asked. And that also is what is most dangerous to status quo, asking questions. Questions lead to us finding out contradictions. Contradictions are like, how can you see? And then things, people organize and then change. This piece. I think what I really fear about that is the silencing of my own voice. So when I walked through the Fletcher exhibit, I picked all the things, and then I saw some of them in person for the first time, and some of them just moved me in ways that I can't really describe. So when I saw one of the pieces in the back gallery, this artist came to mind. This is Henri Damier. So if you don't know who Damier is, he is the political cartoonist, satirist of his time, right? We're talking like mid-1800s. And his main aim in the beginning was going after this person right here, Louis Philippe, the last king of France. And every time he paints him or draws him, he draws him with this like pile of shit-shaped head, which Philippe did not like. He did not like it. And in this drawing here, I mean, they're feeding him all of the riches of France. They're going into his mouth, and they're coming out as nothing more than paperwork out of his ass. So this is calling things directly how he sees them, and this is dangerous in the time of this maker. Damier spent 6 months in prison because of this work for slandering the king. So I saw this piece, and it reminded me of something back there. I mean, this is one of Damier's most famous works. So this is also talking about something Louis Philippe did. One of these people supposedly shot at a guardsman out of the window, a National Guardsman, and Philippe ordered all the National Guard to kill everyone in the apartment building. So this was Damier taking a direct stance. So I won't talk about this, but you should read about that print. It's one of the most important ones ever made. But this is what really struck me of one of the pieces back in the gallery. So this is Louis Philippe also, and it's called Past, the Present, and the Future. So it's these multiple faces that politicians take. It's really down to earth, kind person, this cold-hearted politician, and then a tyrant in the sense of when you were trying to with all of the faces of Damier. And this piece got me. So it's back there in the back gallery. Why I like this so much is it uses design tricks to pull us closer to something we might not want to consider. So if you're a DeSantis supporter and you look at this fast, you might not even notice that he's there. You just notice this children's book, which we all grew up with, that flips images to make up other things. And then that's enough. That's already emotionally got me in a position of like feeling romantic and sentimental about a thing. And then to add this politician in there, it talks about DeSantis and all the faces that he holds. You know, he's in front of a white supremacist group, he's a white supremacist. He's in front of a church, he's the most godliest man on the planet. If he is in front of this, change. So it speaks to exactly what Damier was doing. And it does it in a way that tricks the viewer to get closer to something that they don't normally want to get close to, right? And it's done in a really, really brilliant way. It's something else I wanted to say about that. I lost my train of thought. Says this smug ass face that makes me like. It just hits on all levels. It's really smart. Oh, and it talks about politicians in general. It uses one person, but it becomes an indictment about all, which is what Damier was doing also in his work. Oh, and I know what I wanted to say. This was made in Florida. This is behind enemy lines for this work back here. Because they don't want this work. They don't want it there. And they're doing everything they can to make sure that artists and intellectuals and teachers are silenced. Banning books, banning artists. He wants to actually ban any type of political protest on college campuses. College campuses are where political protest is supposed to happen. Yeah. Right? If we go back to that Berkeley and Country Joe McDonald on Berkeley's campus, that is like protest capital of the planet, right? And they want to try to stop it. So this is not so different. It's dangerous for an artist to make this work in Florida right now, especially for a teacher. Me saying even a quarter of things I just said to you in this room would get me fired from a state university. I'd be gone. You'd be like, he said what? That would be the end. So this piece really spoke to me. Another thing I was reminded of when I walked back there was this piece. So if you guys don't know what these are, Otto Dick's served in the First World War, and he created a series of prints called Der Krieg in 1924, which are basically a series of 70 prints that are just one gut shot after another of the First World War. And they're from his direct experience of trench warfare. This one actually is part of a collection that I'm building. This was just purchased for me from, not this exact copy, but one of them, a signed edition from a university that I have a traveling exhibition that's like this one back here. That's of artists that have donated things to a collection that I'm now traveling to colleges and universities under two stipulations. The first one is the college has to build curriculum around it. It's not just pictures on the wall. That is not just pictures on the wall. That is not a stroll through the park. That is not a vacation destination. That is a place for us to have an entry point into all of the subject matter that each one of those artists is taking on. That is why it's there. It's for us to ask a question and take back into the world with us. So I'm doing something similar to the Dyers are doing. I'm just trying, and I'm doing it to try to balance the other part of my practice with now curatorial practice, because I think it might be helpful to get students to consider their responsibility by spending lots of time with work like this. But this piece reminded me, a piece of this collection reminded me of this one, and that was this one right here. In Ukraine, right now, this is what it looks like. We are back to trench warfare in Ukraine. We are 100 years in the past fighting the war the exact same fucking way we did in 1918. And this piece reminded me of that. And I want to read something for you. I want to read something that the artist of this wrote, because I heard it and it really got to me. So these are her words. On February 24th, 2022, life stopped. The war began. Waking up from the terrible explosions and getting ready. The first thing I packed in my suitcase was a notebook and a pencil. Sitting in the basement, listening to the constant explosions and shelling of my city, I continued to draw because it helped me not to go insane. Because of the horror, I understood that with even greater fury, the importance of the development of Ukrainian art. And above all, I strive to spread it beyond the borders of Ukraine. Now I'm 18, and I can say with certainty that I've been drawing all of my life, and no obstacles will stop me. This piece, and really all of the pieces from Ukrainian artists that are in this exhibition, are so important. They're being made behind enemy lines right now, and the only thing these people have to get the story out is making this art. And they give it to us to now do something with. Now, I feel sentimental and emotional when I read that, but that's not enough. That's not enough. There's two things that can happen out there. Not knowing is bad enough, but now knowing and hearing that and deciding to do nothing, that is far more sinister. We all have a responsibility once we know. Just knowing and doing nothing is like listening to NPR. It's like mental masturbation. Like I listen to NPR, and because I heard this segment on this thing, like now I'm aware. I'm part of the solution. No, you're not. We have to do something. And that project, by the way, which was started by an alumna of ETSU who's in the audience back there, I can't wait to talk to him. He has raised $2 million for Ukrainian support in his country through all of the things he's doing. And one of the things he's doing is working with artists there to make work to come here with the hope that maybe they can sell some of this work to help support their efforts. And more importantly, and I want to talk to him about tonight, I want him to figure out ways to not have to sell this work to get that money, because this work is important. It can't be collected and hidden away somewhere. It needs to be talked about. That statement needs to be said every time people see this, because it's powerful and it makes me want to do something. It makes me want to get engaged. So that's another one. Another thing that came to my mind when I walked around is one of the prints back here made me think about this artist. This is Emory Douglas. Emory Douglas has the coolest title in the history of art. He's the Minister of Culture, the revolutionary artist in the Black Panther Party. That's a title. And he lived up to it. At 18 and 19 and 20, he made work that were getting the other people in the Black Panther Party killed. They were making work behind enemy lines. And this work spoke to me when I saw one of the pieces out in the collection. Oh, a total side note. I don't talk about things that I think that are interesting, or that I find to be like a reward of the work that I've done. The greatest thing that when I did the work at Strike Through in San Francisco, Emory Douglas's work is in that exhibition also, and he walked in, and it was like, I don't get starstruck often, but I was like following the Minister of Culture around. And I got my picture taken with him. Oh, by the way, like he told me to email him later. This is awesome. His email is emerydouglas@gmail. Like, how is a famous person's email address like just their name at Gmail? Oh, that was pretty awesome. But this artist's work spoke to me when I looked at the work, when I thought about Emory Douglas. This is Justine Fisher's work called 1921. So this piece is about the Tulsa race riots. And what she's done here is given us multiple views of that 24 hours of extreme violence in Tulsa. Consider what your position is to those things. It's a mirror that's begging you to ask questions about yourself so that you can take them back into the world with you and do something about it. Us knowing is not enough. And granted, we can't take it all on, but we can ask questions, we can talk about what we've seen, and then what that's doing is then perpetuating that ripple that the artist created when the rock was thrown in the water. So anyways, thank you very much for listening to me ramble on.